They locked me out of my own house using a chain and slapped a sign on it claiming I was trespassing. After a grueling 6-hour drive from Denver, jobless and desperate, I arrived only to find Dorothy Whitmon, the HOA president, standing on my grandfather's land like she owned it. "This road is closed to unregistered residents," she declared, gripping her clipboard like a badge of authority. That's when it hit me. Dorothy had no idea what she just triggered. She'd made a critical mistake. She never bothered to check what else my grandfather had left behind. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because this woman was about to lose everything she'd spent the last 15 years manipulating and controlling. The whole scene felt like a bad dream. I sat in my car, engine still humming, staring at the cabin that had been in my family for nearly 6 decades. Just half a year ago, I was a senior developer at a rising fintech company in Denver, working on breakthrough mobile banking solutions. Then the investors pulled out, the company restructured, and I was out at 32 years old, unemployed, with a shrinking bank account and a LinkedIn profile screaming laid off. The cabin my grandfather left me when he passed away seemed like a safe haven, an escape to figure things out, pick up some freelance gigs, and plan my next steps. Over the years, Pine Valley Estates had swallowed up the surrounding wilderness, morphing from quiet Colorado backwoods into a ritzy community of oversized homes and pristine lawns. But my grandfather's log cabana with its wraparound porch and view of the lake stood untouched, a relic of a simpler time. Dorothy's hand twitched slightly when I mentioned my grandfather's name, a tiny tremble quickly hidden by a tighter grip on her clipboard. "Walter Cooper's place," she muttered, her voice taking a defensive tone. "Yes, we're aware. However, all residents, even heirs, are required to register with the Pine Valley Homeowners Association before accessing community roads. It's about safety and preserving property values." The security guard beside her, a young man who clearly didn't want to be there, shifted awkwardly and avoided my gaze. When Dorothy wasn't watching, he gave me a look that said, "Yeah, I know this is ridiculous, but it's my job." "Listen," I said, trying to stay composed despite my fatigue and frustration. "I just drove 6 hours. I have the deed, I have the keys, and I've been paying the property taxes. Can we sort out the paperwork after I've actually been inside my own house?" That's when Tom Bradley strolled up, wearing the polished smile of a small-town politician. Now, Dorothy," he said with a rehearsed friendliness that instantly set off alarm bells. "Let's help Mr. Cooper get settled first. Welcome to Pine Valley. I'm Tom Bradley. I serve on the HOA board and own the local hardware store. Why don't you follow me to the coffee shop? We'll work this out like neighbors." He was sweating, despite the crisp mountain air, and the way he kept glancing at Dorothy made me suspicious of whatever arrangement they had. But I was worn out, irritated, and badly needed a restroom, so I agreed. As I turned my car around to follow Tom, Dorothy called out with a smile that didn't quite meet her eyes, "Mr. Cooper, I'll prepare the paperwork. There are just a few minor issues at your grandfather's property we'll need to address." The coffee shop was aggressively quaint, with inspirational quotes on the walls and a pastry case that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the early 2000s. Tom ordered 2 black coffees without asking what I wanted and launched into a monologue about community standards and property values. "Your grandfather was something of a legend around here," he said, dabbing his forehead with a napkin even though the AC was blasting. "Built that cabin himself, refused to join the HOA when we formed it back in '85. Dorothy's been very patient, but now that the property's changing hands, well, a broken bar, there are standards." He slid a thick booklet across the table, the Pine Valley Estates HOA Handbook, 400 pages of regulations, bound in a cheerful yellow cover featuring smiling families at a neighborhood cookout. "Just a little light reading," Tom joked weakly, his laugh more nervous than amused. I flipped through a few pages as he kept rambling. The rules were absurd, dictating everything from which of 17 shades of beige mailboxes could be painted, to the exact angle American flags had to be displayed. "How long have you known Dorothy?" I asked, cutting him off. The change in his demeanor was instant. The fake charm vanished. 15 years, he replied quietly, glancing around like she might be listening in. "She's been president the whole time. Very committed, very thorough." The way he said thorough sounded more like a warning than praise. We sat in awkward silence until his phone buzzed. He checked it, turned pale, and stood up abruptly. "I've got to go," he muttered, throwing a 20 on the table. "Dorothy will have the paperwork. Just a broken bar work with her. It's easier that way." Back at the cabin, Dorothy was waiting with a thick stack of documents, looking like she was about to serve a court order. "Mr. Cooper," she began, her tone smug, "I conducted a preliminary inspection of your property from the road. I've identified 52 violations of community standards that need immediate attention." She handed me a multi-page list, complete with photos and legal citations. Grass higher than 2.75 inches, a violation of Section 3.2. Mailbox painted an unapproved color, Section 5.7. Subsection C. Unauthorized garden no mess, Section 12.4. And the list went on for pages. "The total in fines? $18,000. This is insane," I snapped, my patience gone. "Some of this stuff has been here since before I was born. This wildflower garden was my grandmother's pride back in the 70s. Dorothy pulled out one last document, clearly saving the worst for last. Her expression was triumphant. "Oh, almost forgot," she said, pretending to be casual. "This is a notice of intent to foreclose. The HOA is prepared to place a lien on your property for unpaid fines and non-compliance. You have 72 hours to pay the $18,000 or vacate." My hands trembled as I took the paper. I was beyond angry. I was stunned. "You can't do this," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure if they were true. "This is my property. My grandfather built this place long before your HOA even existed." Dorothy's smile was as cold as the wind off the lake. She turned to walk back to her car and said over her shoulder, "Watch me." 72 hours. "Mr. Cooper," she called over her shoulder, "welcome to Pine Valley Estates." Once Dorothy finally left, I made it into the cabin. Though made it felt generous. I had to park a quarter-mile away and hike in with my bags like some kind of suburban exile. The inside smelled like pine, dust, and memories, just like it had during childhood visits. Grandpa's old furniture sat frozen in time under yellow dust covers, untouched since the funeral. I dropped my bags, collapsed on the couch, and tried to process the storm I just walked into. $18,000 in fines, for wildflowers, mailbox paint, and a damn garden gnome. The HOA handbook glared at me from the coffee table, a 400-page cinder block of authoritarian nonsense wrapped in cheerful yellow. I knew I'd have to read it if I was going to have any shot at fighting back. But first, I needed sleep, food, maybe a lawyer, probably in that order. When morning sunlight cut through the windows, for a moment I forgot where I was until I saw the foreclosure notice sitting on the table like a venomous snake. I spent the morning buried in the handbook, growing more furious with every page. The rules weren't just strict, they were surgical in their absurdity. Mailbox must be cottage white, number 23A, not number 22 or number 24A, and placed exactly 42 inches from the ground, measured from the base to the bottom of the mailbox door. Grass couldn't exceed 2.5 inches, measured with an HOA-approved ruler. That a surprise could only be purchased at Tom Bradley's hardware store, for $39.99. Even American flags were regulated. They could only be flown if they were precisely 1/3 the size of the community flag at the neighborhood entrance. Grandpa's 3x5 flag, a non-conforming display under Section 8.3, subsection F. It was never about community standards. This was about control, power, and Dorothy Whitman was Pine Valley's unelected queen. I was debating whether tossing the handbook into the fireplace violated some code about unauthorized burning when there was a knock at the door. Not Dorothy's stormtrooper pounding. This was a soft, almost guilty tap. I opened it to find an elderly woman clutching a package, nervously scanning the street. "You're Walter's grandson," she whispered. Not a question. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Martha Walsh. I lived down the road until 2 years ago. That woman Dorothea forced me out, bankrupted me over fence height and paint colors. But I kept this." She pressed the package into my hands. "My diary. 5 years of notes. Every dirty trick Dorothy pulled, every lie, every illegal fine. Your grandfather was the only one who stood up to her, and now it's your turn." The diary was a meticulous record, written in neat cursive. Page after page documented fines, harassment, rigged vote, an entire regime of petty tyranny. She offered to buy your grandfather's place 5 times, Martha said, flipping to a dog-eared page. Always right after slamming him with fines. She wants this side of the lake for something. But Walter wouldn't sell. Over my dead body, he used to say, she added, then paused, suddenly aware of what she'd said. I'm sorry. That was a no, I said, smiling for the first time since I arrived. That sounds exactly like Grandpa. Martha leaned in, lowering her voice. Check his attic. Walter told me once he had a broken bar insurance. They'll come for it when I'm gone, he said. But I've got surprises for them. After she slipped out like a character in a Cold War thriller, Tom Bradley showed up with a casserole and a fresh coat of fake concern. Thought you might be hungry, he said, letting himself in. He looked around too much, snapped a few covert photos on his phone when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Settling in okay? He asked. I know Dorothy can be firm, but she really does care about the community. He was sweating again. Nervous. I decided to test Martha's claim. Tom, I said casually, has Dorothy ever tried to buy this place? The color drained from his face. He almost dropped the casserole. Yeah, I wouldn't know anything about that. She's just interested in HOA standards. He cleared his throat. Speaking of, she asked me to remind you about the 72-hour deadline. Just being neighborly. He bolted out the door like it was on fire. Later that day, Dorothy hit back. I was doing dishes when the water just stopped. No warning, no trickle, just silence. I checked everything at the pump, the pipes, nothing. 20 minutes later, Dorothy was back, clipboard in hand and crocodile concern on her face. Mr. Cooper, she said, we've had to temporarily suspend water service to the sector. Emergency maintenance, old pipes, you know, safety first. How long? I asked, jaw clenched. Oh, hard to say. Days, weeks. These systems are so unreliable, she smiled. Of course, if the property were brought up to code, we could prioritize the repairs. Subtle as a brick to the teeth. Pay up or stay thirsty. I spent the rest of the day hauling water in buckets from the lake and boiling it on the stove. Neighbors watched through curtains like I was some wild animal let loose in their perfect little zoo. That night, I climbed into the attic to search for whatever insurance Grandpa left behind. The space was cramped, dust dancing in the flashlight beam. Behind a stack of old National Geographics, I found a metal box labeled in Grandpa's precise handwriting. Property documents. Inside were surveys, tax receipts, notarized forms. And at the bottom, a folder labeled Cooper Road A legal status. I opened it as Martha's diary fell open beside me to a page with a sticky note. The road. Dorothy doesn't know about the road. The next morning, everything was dead. My phone, my laptop, even the router showed nothing and no bars. No networks. My interview with a San Francisco tech firm, a $180,000 lifeline, was in 30 minutes. Dorothy had gone nuclear. I grabbed my laptop bag and flew out the door, tires screeching as I took the mountain curves too fast, racing to the nearest coffee shop with Wi-Fi. Every second counted as I burst into the coffee shop, ordering the first thing on the menu and claiming a corner table. I tried to ignore the amused looks from locals who'd clearly spotted desperation the moment I walked in. The connection was terrible. My video froze every few seconds while I scrambled to explain my experience with distributed systems and API architecture. The recruiter's face pixelated, locking just as I was answering a key question about handling high-traffic scenarios. Can you hear me? I asked for the 5th time, watching her frustration grow through the digital chaos. Somewhere in the background, the sound of grinding coffee beans drowned out everything. I tried moving to a quieter spot only to knock my coffee over. Hot liquid splashed across the table and onto my laptop keyboard. The screen flickered once, then went black. 2 minutes later, her final email arrived. Thank you for your time. We're looking for someone more reliable for this remote position. Best of luck. I sat there, sticky with coffee and swallowed by defeat, staring at the rejection. My hand shook as I closed the dead laptop. Before I could stop myself, I slammed my fist on the table hard enough to turn every head in the shop. The drive back to Pine Valley was a blur of rage and desperation. That job was everything, a chance to breathe, to fight Dorothy on equal footing, maybe even hire a real lawyer, but she'd known exactly what she was doing, cutting off my connection right before the most important call of the year. Back at the cabin, Tom Bradley was waiting outside, snapping photos of my property with a professional camera. "Tom," I called, and he jumped like I'd caught him red-handed. "Oh hey, Ryan," he said, forcing a nervous laugh, "just documenting some violations for the board. Dorothy likes thorough records." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Interesting, Tom. Does Dorothy always have you spying on residents?" His face drained of color. He babbled about community standards and helping the neighborhood, but kept glancing at my phone. "You know what? Forget it," he said abruptly, practically running to his car. "Dorothy knows everything anyway." That afternoon came the next escalation, a masterstroke. Returning from hauling water, I found Cooper Road blocked by new barriers. Official signs declared the road closed for safety inspections. Concrete blocks sealed off the only access to my cabin. Dorothy stood there, wearing a hard hat that looked fresh out of a costume shop, flanked by two men in orange vests who seemed miserable to be there. "Mr. Cooper," she announced loud enough for the gathering crowd, "our safety committee has deemed this road structurally unsound. It will remain closed until repairs are made." I struggled to keep my voice steady in front of a dozen onlookers. "This is the only way to my property. How am I supposed to get home?" Dorothy smiled like a predator. "You'll have to use the walking trails through the forest. It's just 4 miles around the lake. Think of it as healthy exercise." The neighbors avoided my gaze, eager to distance themselves from the troublemaker. 4 miles through rough, overgrown forest trails carrying groceries, water, anything I needed to survive. "This is insane," I said louder than I meant. "You can't just close a road because you feel like it. Where's the engineering report? The county approval?" Her smile vanished, replaced by cold authority. "The HOA has full control over community infrastructure. Mr. Cooper, if you'd read your handbook instead of having emotional outbursts, you'd know that. Now move your vehicle before it gets towed." The crowd melted away. As I moved my car, I heard a woman whisper to another, "That's what happens when you don't follow the rules." The hike back was brutal. My laptop bag and water jugs weighed me down as I pushed through brambles and scratched myself raw. I was exhausted and angrier than ever, but anger was fuel. That night, after treating my wounds, I climbed back into the attic with Grandpa's document box and Martha's diary. I needed answers, and I knew they were here. The box was full of receipts, papers, and files dating back to the 1960s, all meticulously organized in Grandpa's careful hand. Building permits, tax records, surveys. At the bottom, in a manila envelope marked "Keep Forever," I found a series of documents that stopped my heart. The original construction permit for Cooper Road, dated 1965, receipts for concrete, asphalt, labor, and beneath it all, a deed proving that Walter Cooper had built and only the private road that was now the only access to half of Pine Valley Estates. Sitting there in the dusty attic, I realized Grandpa hadn't just built his cabin, he had built the road and owned the land beneath it, with his own money. If these documents were really legally binding, then Dorothy Whitman had just closed a road she had no authority over. My hands were steady now as I pulled out my phone to photograph every page. "Wait," I said aloud to the empty attic, rereading the permit. "Grandpa built this road, he owns this road." The implications hit me like a freight train. If I owned Cooper Road, then the HOA had been using my private property for decades. Every resident beyond my cabin had been crossing my land, and Dorothy had just handed me the greatest gift possibly, proof she didn't understand who she was dealing with. I carefully packed up the documents, exhaustion forgotten. Tomorrow, everything would change. The county courthouse in Bakersfield opened promptly at 8 a.m., and I was waiting at the door, folder in hand and determination fueled by pure spite. The clerk, a middle-aged woman who clearly had seen every property dispute in the county, examined my papers with growing interest. "Cooper Road in Pine Valley," she said, pulling up records on her computer. "Oh yes, I remember this. Your grandfather was very particular about his documentation." She showed me screen after screen, the original 1965 deed, continuous tax payments for a private road, and then my heart raced at a use agreement from 1985, when the HOA first formed. Grandpa had granted the HOA free use of Cooper Road for community access, but with one crucial condition, typed in bold letters: this agreement may be revoked immediately if the HOA or its representatives engage in harassment, intimidation, or bad faith actions against the Cooper family or their property. I spent 3 hours in that courthouse making copies, getting official certifications, and talking to anyone who would listen about property law. The clerk, who introduced herself as Nancy, was particularly helpful. Your grandfather came here every year to pay the road tax, she said. Always in cash, always got a receipt. Said he wanted a paper trail a mile long if anyone ever tried to take what was his. By the time I left, I had a briefcase full of ammunition and a plan beginning to take shape. But first, I needed legal confirmation that these documents meant what I thought they did. I drove straight to the law offices of Rodriguez and Associates, where Lisa Rodriguez had agreed to see me on short notice. She was younger than I expected, maybe 38, with sharp eyes and a leather briefcase that looked battle-worn. Let me see what you've got, she said, spreading my documents across her conference table. Lisa's expression shifted from professional curiosity to genuine excitement as she reviewed everything. This is incredible, she said, holding up the use agreement. Your grandfather essentially built a legal time bomb. Look at this language: harassment, intimidation, bad faith actions. That covers everything Dorothy's done to you. She pulled out a legal pad and started making notes with the enthusiasm of someone who just found a winning lottery ticket. The road is unquestionably yours. The tax records prove continuous ownership. The deed is clear. And this conditional use agreement? Genius. Your grandfather was playing four-dimensional chess while everyone else was playing checkers. She looked up, grinning. Ryan, you own that road. Every person who lives past your cabin has been using your private property for 40 years, and Dorothy just handed you the perfect reason to revoke their access. I spent the rest of the afternoon with Lisa planning our approach. She insisted on recording everything, building a case that would be bulletproof if Dorothy tried to fight back. The key, Lisa said, is to let her dig her own grave. Don't reveal anything until you have her completely cornered. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Tom Bradley sitting in his car outside the law office, clearly watching us. Speaking of harassment, I said, showing Lisa the photo. She smiled like a shark sensing blood. Perfect. Document everything, every interaction, every threat, every time someone follows you or photographs your property. We're building a pattern of behavior that goes way beyond normal HOA operations. For the first time in days, I felt confident. Then my phone rang. It was Tom. His voice sounded like he was falling apart. Ryan, I need to talk to you, he said, voice shaking. Not at your place, not in public. Meet me at the old boat launch at midnight. Come alone. It sounded like a bad movie, but something in his voice made me agree. That evening, I prepared for whatever was coming, charging my phone to record everything and letting Lisa know where I was going. At 11:45, I drove to the abandoned boat launch on the far side of the lake. Tom was already there, sitting in his car with the engine running, like he might bolt at any moment. When I got in, he looked terribly unshaven, worn down. She owns me, he said without preamble. Dorothy knows I didn't pay all my taxes for the hardware store of $50,000 over 5 years. She found out somehow, and now she uses it against me, makes me spy on people, report back, take pictures. He broke down crying, ugly sobs from a broken man. Tom, why are you telling me this? I asked, genuinely confused by his sudden confession. Tom pulled out his phone, hands shaking. Because I can't do it anymore, he said. She wants me to break into your cabin tomorrow while you're in Tona to steal whatever documents you found. But I'm done. I'm going to record a confession, tell everything I know about her operations of the fake safety inspections, the rigged board votes, the way she targets properties she wants to buy. All of it. For the next hour, Tom spilled everything while I recorded on my phone. Dorothy's 5-year plan to monopolize the lakefront properties, her connections with corrupt city officials, and how she'd driven out at least a dozen families through targeted harassment. When he finished, He looked smaller, somewhat deflated. "I'll email you the video confession tonight," he said. "Do whatever you want with it. I'm checking myself into the hospital tomorrow. Stress, exhaustion. At least she can't get to me there." I drove back to the cabin, spending days trying to process everything Tom had revealed. But Dorothy wasn't finished escalating. Waiting on my door was another official-looking notice, this one more aggressive than the last. It was a demolition order, declaring my cabin structurally unsound and dangerous to the community. I had 72 hours to vacate before the county would begin forced demolition. At first glance, the document looked official, but Lisa had taught me what to watch for and I spotted it immediately. No county seal, no inspector's signature, just Dorothy's name and the whole logo. She was impersonating city officials, and now a federal crime, if we could prove it. I stood there, holding the fake demolition order, staring at my grandfather's cabin that had withstood 60 Colorado winters without so much as a creaking board. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't rage. It was cold, calculated determination. I went inside and found the photo of Grandpa kept on the mantle, the one where he stands in front of the newly built cabin, hammer in hand and a satisfied grin on his face. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" I said to the photo. "You knew they'd come after the place once you were gone. So you left me everything I needed to fight back." I pulled out my laptop and started composing an email to every resident in Pine Valley Estate. The subject line was simple: emergency home meeting tomorrow. The truth about Cooper Road and the body. I wrote just enough to guarantee full attendance. Documentation has come to light that will affect every resident's access to their homes. Your attendance is critical. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. Dorothy thought she had me cornered with her fake demolition order and a closed road tomorrow. She was about to learn what happens when you play chess with someone who inherited the board. By 7 p.m., the Pine Valley Community Center was standing room only, with at least 50 residents crammed into a space designed for 30. Dorothy sat at the head table, clipboard in hand and a smug expression on her face, flanked by Brandon Phillips, her nephew who claimed to be a real estate attorney but looked like he'd graduated last week, and another man I didn't recognize. She had prepared a presentation complete with slides showing my cabin's supposed violations and graphs about declining property values. The whole setup screamed ambush, but I wasn't worried. I had Lisa Rodriguez beside me, and a briefcase full of documents that would flip this entire meeting on its head. Dorothy called the meeting to order with the practiced authority of someone who'd never faced real opposition. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, her voice carrying the condescending tone of a teacher lecturing students. "We're here to discuss the serious situation with the Cooper property and its impact on our community's safety and values." She launched into her presentation with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor at a show trial. For 20 minutes, she detailed every supposed violation at my property, complete with photographs Tom had taken during his spy missions. "The Cooper property represents a clear and present danger to our community standards," she declared, clicking through slides of my grandfather's wildflower garden and the cabin's rustic exterior. "Mr. Cooper has shown blatant disregard for our rules and a hostile attitude toward community governance. Just yesterday, he accused me of harassment simply for ensuring our roads are safe for all residents." The crowd murmured sympathetically, and I saw several people nodding along. Dorothy was good at playing the reasonable administrator dealing with a difficult troublemaker. She continued building to her crescendo. "His refusal to bring the property into compliance forces us to consider more serious measures. No one wants to see a forced sale, but sometimes the good of the community must come first." For another 10 minutes, she painted me as everything from a city slicker who didn't understand community values to a potential threat to their children's safety because my grass was too tall. Brandon chimed in occasionally with legal-sounding nonsense about property liens and enforcement mechanisms. The other man introduced himself as a structural engineer who'd never actually visited my property but was prepared to testify about the dangers of uninspected buildings. It was a masterful performance, and by the time Dorothy finished, I could feel the room's hostility like a physical weight. "Now," Dorothy said with theatrical reluctance, "Mr. Cooper has requested time to address the board. Please remember that emotional outbursts and unfounded accusations will not be tolerated." She sat down, satisfied like someone who'd already won. I stood slowly, taking my time, letting the silence stretch until people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Thank you, Dorothy," I said, calm and pleasant. "That was quite a presentation, very thorough. I just have one quick question before I begin." I paused, making eye contact with as many residents as possible. "Who owns Cooper Road?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Dorothy's smug expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. "The community owns Cooper Road," she said, but her voice had lost some authority. "It's been part of Pine Valley Estate since the beginning." I smiled and pulled out my first document. "That's interesting, because according to county records, Cooper Road is private property, built in 1965 by Walter Coopera, my grandfather, privately funded, privately maintained, and privately owned for 59 years. A murmur rippled through the crowd like the first rumble of an avalanche. "That's impossible," Dorothy said, but her face had gone pale. "We've maintained that road for decades. The HOA has always controlled access." At that moment, the door opened, and Nancy from the county clerk's office walked in. I'd asked her to come as a witness and her timing was perfect. "Evening, folks," she said in her no-nonsense voice. "I'm Nancy Williams, county clerk for the past 30 years. Mr. Cooper asked me to verify some documents, and I can confirm every piece of paper he's about to show you is 100% authentic and legally binding." I pulled out the deed first and projected it onto the screen Dorothy had so helpfully set up for her presentation. "This is the original deed for Cooper Road," I explained as residents leaned forward to read. "Notice the official county seal and the surveyor's signature. My grandfather built this road on his own land with his own money." Next came the tax records of 59 years of payments that Nancy verified one by one. The room was silent except for Dorothy's increasingly rapid breathing. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued, pulling out a 1985 agreement. "When the HOA formed, my grandfather graciously allowed residents to use his private road for free. No fees, no restrictions, just neighborly kindness. But he was also smart enough to protect his family." I projected the agreement onto the screen and read the key clause out loud. "This agreement may be revoked immediately if the HOA or its representatives engage in harassment, intimidation, or bad faith actions against the Cooper family or their property." The words echoed in the sudden silence. I let my voice harden. "Let's talk about harassment, shall we? $18,000 in fines for violations that never existed. Water shut off for a maintenance that never happened. Internet and phone service cut on the day of a crucial job interview that could have changed my financial future." I clicked through my presentation, showing Dorothy's notices, Tom's spy photos, the fake demolition order. "This isn't community governance," I said firmly. "This is targeted harassment, designed to force me out so someone can buy my property cheap. And according to this legal agreement, every resident beyond my cabin has been trespassing on my private road since Dorothy started this campaign." The room erupted. People shouted questions, demanding to know if they'd be charged with trespassing, if fees would be required, how this had gone unnoticed for so long. Dorothy stood, hands visibly shaking, trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous," she shouted over the chaos. "Those documents could be forged. You can't just claim ownership of a community road." But Nancy, the county clerk, shook her head firmly. "Ma'am, I personally verified every document. That road belongs to the Cooper family, free and clear, since 1965. The final blow came unexpectedly. Tom Bradley's wife stood up at the back of the room. "My husband's in the hospital," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "But he asked me to play this if things got heated." She raised her phone and hit play on Tom's confession video. His broken voice filled the room, exposing Dorothy's schemes at the blackmail, the targeted harassment, the families she'd driven away. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their trusted HOA president was unmasked as a manipulative bully. When the video ended, Dorothy's facade shattered completely, her face shifting from pale, to red, to an alarming purple. "You can't do this," she whispered. Then louder, "You can't do this." But I could, and I was. "Here's what's going to happen," I announced. "The HOA has 48 hours to negotiate new terms for using my road. Until then, Cooper Road is closed to all Pine Valley residents. I suggest you talk to your president about her behavior." Dorothy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. 48 hours. Miss Whitman. Use them wisely. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I had installed a chain across Cooper Road with a sign reading, "Private Property A closed pending negotiations," letters large enough to see from space. The first car arrived at 6:15, a commuter trying to get to work, honking for 5 solid minutes before realizing I wasn't moving the chain. Within an hour, 20 cars were backed up, and the honking reached symphony levels. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the chaos unfold with a satisfaction that probably wasn't entirely healthy. My phone rang non-stop, but I only answered Lisa's calls. "They're losing their minds," she reported gleefully. "Dorothy's called 3 emergency board meetings already, and it's not even 8 a.m. By noon, the situation had escalated from inconvenient to serious. Parents couldn't get their kids to school, workers couldn't get to jobs, one pregnant woman had to walk 2 miles to meet an ambulance because it couldn't reach her house. The frustration was turning toward Dorothy, just as I hoped. Around 2 p.m., a group of residents came to my gate, led by Janet Brown, a nurse who lived 3 houses down. "Ryan," she said, exhausted, "I get it. Dorothy's been a nightmare. She fined me $300 because my daughter sold Girl Scout cookies without HOA approval, but punishing everyone isn't the answer." I felt a twinge of guilt but held firm. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm exercising my property rights. If you want access to your homes, talk to the woman who created this mess." Janet's expression hardened, but not at me. "Oh, we're going to talk to her, all right." That night, she called a community meeting. "You should stream it," she urged. Stories were spreading about what Dorothy had done over the years. Tom Bradley wasn't the only victim. By hour 24, Pine Valley Estates was in full revolt. Someone had created a social media page called Dorothy's Victims, and the stories poured in. Families forced out by fines, elderly residents bullied into selling cheap, elections rigged in Dorothy's favor despite opposition. The pattern was clear and damning, but Dorothy wasn't going down quietly. That afternoon, she showed up at my gate with 3 lawyers, though Brandon wasn't with them. "Mr. Cooper," the lead attorney said, "we're prepared to offer $50,000 for an immediate easement agreement." I didn't even get up. "Not interested." Dorothy's composure cracked. "Name your price," she demanded. "This is destroying the community." I stood and walked to the gate. "It's not about money anymore, Dorothy. It's about accountability." Hour 36 brought the revelation that shattered everything. Tom's confession video had been posted anonymously on the Pine Valley community page, under the name Grandpa Rules 1965A, and it went viral. More importantly, his courage inspired others. 5 families came forward, revealing they'd been systematically targeted by Dorothy, with fines escalating whenever she or her nephew showed interest in their properties. The conspiracy was bigger than anyone thought. Someone even made memes mocking the situation, with HOA equals harassment becoming a rallying cry. The local news picked up the story. By evening, reporters were at both ends of Cooper Road, interviewing stranded residents and documenting the chaos. One dad carrying his daughter on his shoulders through the forest to get home became the symbol of the absurdity. At 3:47 a.m. on the second night, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Dorothy a complete mess. Her perfect hair was disheveled, makeup smeared, clutching a bottle of prescription medication. "You win," she said hollowly. "I'll resign. I'll pay whatever fines you want. Just open the road." "People are turning on me," she whispered. "My own neighbors won't speak to me. Brandon abandoned me, said I'm too toxic for his real estate career." For a moment, she looked human, vulnerable. "I just wanted something good for Brandon," she said, slumping against my doorframe. "His real estate business was failing. I thought if I could get him some prime properties cheap, give him a chance to. Do you know what it's like to watch your only family struggle?" she said, her voice softening for a moment. I almost felt sorry for her until she straightened up and that familiar, calculating look returned to her eyes. "But you've ruined everything," she hissed. "I'll destroy you for this. I'll find a way." Before I could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the tense silence. "That's not me," Dorothy screamed, but we saw flickering flames in the darkness. Someone had thrown a Molotov cocktail at my gate, and the fire was quickly spreading to the dry brush nearby. "If I can't have it, no one can." Brandon's voice carried through the night. "Brandon, no, this isn't what we planned," Dorothy shouted, but her nephew was beyond reason. He lobbed another firebomb, this one landing dangerously close to my cabin. I grabbed the garden hose while Dorothy, in a rare moment of either redemption or self-preservation, called 911. The fire department arrived swiftly, but not before 3 residents camping nearby tackled Brandon. As the police led him away, he ranted about his aunt's broken promises and how her schemes had ruined his life. Dorothy stood silently, watching her nephew's arrest, looking older than her 62 years. The fight had gone out of her completely. As dawn broke on the 48th hour, the community gathered once more at the gate, ready for what everyone knew would be the final confrontation. Dorothy arrived with a simple folder and no clipboard or arsenal of documents this time. "Mr. Cooper," she said quietly, "I'm prepared to offer my complete surrender." "What are your terms?" I asked, already having them typed and reviewed by Lisa and 3 other lawyers. Dorothy would resign immediately from the HOA board and agree never to serve in any community organization again. She would pay $50,000 to each of the 5 families she had systematically harassed, using her personal funds and not HOA money. She would record a public apology acknowledging her abuse of power and post it to all community channels. Brandon would be banned from all Pine Valley Estates properties and businesses. In exchange, I would grant the community a 99-year easement for Cooper Road at the price of $1 per year, with clear terms that any future harassment would void the agreement. Dorothy signed the agreement with shaking hands. The crowd watched in silence as the transfer of power happened quickly. After signing, Dorothy faced the assembled crowd and recorded the apology that would soon be shared across every Pine Valley social channel. "I apologize to the community for my abuse of power," she read from prepared notes, her voice mechanical but clear. "I used my position to harass and intimidate residents for personal gain. I violated the trust you placed in me, and I accept full responsibility for my actions." The crowd remained silent, many filming on their phones. This was history for Pine Valley Estates, the fall of a 15-year dynasty. When she finished, Dorothy packed up her clipboard for the last time and walked to her car without looking back. Someone started slow clapping, but Janet Brown quickly shut it down with a sharp look. "This isn't a celebration," she said. "This is a tragedy that didn't need to happen." The community elected Lisa Rodriguez as the new HOA president by unanimous vote. Her legal expertise and role in exposing Dorothy made her the obvious choice. Her first act was to void every fine Dorothy had issued in the past year, pending review. The second was to establish a new bylaws requiring board transparency and term limits. Tom Bradley was released from the hospital a week later, looking healthier than he had in years. He attended his first board meeting as a regular resident, no longer Dorothy's unwilling spy. When he stood to apologize to the community, people listened. "I was weak," he said simply. "I let fear control me, and I hurt good people because of it. I'm in therapy now, and I'm paying back my taxes. I just hope someday you can forgive me." The applause was genuine, a sign of a man trying to make amends. Meanwhile, I set to work bringing my grandfather's cabin into the 21st century while preserving its rustic charm. The San Francisco tech company that had rejected me during the chaos reached out again. Apparently, they were impressed by the viral story of the developer who took down an HOA tyrant. I negotiated a remote position, not the original offer, but more than enough for a comfortable life. I also started offering free coding classes for Pine Valley kids every Saturday morning at the community center. The first class had 5 students. By week 3, there were 20. Parents brought coffee and homemade snacks, and one joked, "You've done more for community unity in a month than Dorothy did in 15 years. The classes became a symbol of the new Pine Valley, a place where knowledge was shared freely, not hoarded for power. Without Dorothy's iron fist crushing any deviation from her rules, the community blossomed. Gardens, decorations, and home improvements flourished, making the neighborhood vibrant and full of character. Property values, which Dorothy claimed to protect through conformity, actually increased as word spread about the community that had overthrown its dictator and emerged stronger. Real estate listings even mentioned the Freedom Road Revolution as a selling point. Martha Walsh sent me a congratulations card from her nursing home with a note. "Your grandfather would be so proud. You didn't just save your home, you saved the soul of Pine Valley." She was right. The community that rose from Dorothy's downfall was more connected, more caring, and more willing to stand up for what was right. 6 months later, I stood at my grandfather's grave holding the original deed to Cooper Road. "You really did know this would happen, didn't you?" I said to the headstone. "You built that clause into the agreement 40 years ago because you knew someone would try to wield power against your family." I left 2 things at his grave: the HOA handbook that started all this trouble, and a photo from the previous weekend's community barbecue, where former enemies shared burgers and laughter. The wind fluttered the handbook's pages until it fell open to the section on property maintenance. I smiled and walked away, leaving the book to the elements. Nature would take care of it, just like it had taken care of Dorothy's reign of terror. Back at the cabin, I updated the Cooper Road sign. It now read, "Cooper Road, built 1965. Drive with respect, arrive with friends." The chain was gone, replaced by a simple stone marker honoring my grandfather's gift to the community. Every time I see residents wave as they pass, I remember his words, "Knowledge is how you defend peace." The story of Pine Valley's revolution spread beyond our small community, inspiring other neighborhoods to examine their own HOA practices. I started getting calls from people across the country facing similar battles. Lisa and I collaborated on a guide to homeowner rights, distributing it for free. Dorothy moved to Arizona, where rumors say she joined another strict HOA. I hope she learned her lesson, but somehow I doubt it. Some people are addicted to control the way others are addicted to substances. Brandon served community service for the arson attempt and lost his real estate license. The last I heard, he was working at a car wash, keeping a very low profile. As for me, I found peace in my grandfather's cabinet coding by day and teaching kids on weekends. The interview I lost because of Dorothy's interference seemed like a disaster at the time, but it led me to something better, a community that stood together when it mattered and a home that truly felt like home. Sometimes the best opportunities aren't the ones you chase, they're the ones that find you when you stand your ground. And sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building something better from the ashes of their empire. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare. Remember, folks, always read the fine print, especially if your grandpa wrote it. When the law is your weapon, justice doesn't need to shout.